Welcome to my super type A attempt at being Zen, the podcast. My name is Risha York, and I will be your host. If you are overworked, overtired, overstretched, overwhelmed, and just over it, you are in the right place. We like to say we are currently working towards Zen-ish. I'm thrilled that you've joined us. Let's see who will be supporting us on our path to Zen today. Hello and welcome back to my super type A attempt at being Zen. My guest today is Beth Grixti, and she is a QHHT practitioner. I'll give her a second to introduce herself. Welcome back, Beth.
Thank you. This is so exciting again.
I know. And so I say back because we had to re-record this because our first recording sounded like it was completely underwater.
Yeah, it was really weird because we tested and it was fine, and then it wasn't.
So folks, I have to tell you, a lot of spooky stuff happens when Beth and I are together, and this just is taking the cake, frankly. I did go and do a QHHT session with her where her audio and her backup audio both failed at a pivotal point in the session. Call us witches, whatever you might call us, but something's up.
Yeah, I don't know. It was the weirdest timing on your session because I said, is she allowed to know this? And then it was done. And it was both were done. I'm like, apparently not.
Yeah, no, it's super weird. And this happens a lot when we're together. There's a lot of weird, kind of spooky things that go on. I'm learning to embrace it.
I think it's pretty interesting. I mean, it definitely reinforces a lot of my wonder about the universe.
Right? Yeah. And also a little bit of fear, frankly.
Kind of. I mean, it definitely feels like we're not really in the driver's seat when that happens.
But anyways, we're here re-recording, which is exciting because now we get to hang out again.
Yes, I love that.
So that's fun.
It's a nice surprise.
Yeah, sure. Happy accidents,
Yeah.
right? But the good news is we have Beth back, and she was happy to be here. And so I'm going to give her a second. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Beth.
All right. I am Beth, clearly. And I began learning about QHHT a little over a year ago now. And this was Dolores Cannon had come up with this sort of technique that got you to the theta state. So that is where we practice when we're doing a QHHT session. I myself am from Muskoka, so I have to do all my practices in person. So generally people have to come to me in order to do that. But it's pretty cool. And I don't know what else to say, really.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
I guess, yeah, there's too much when you're introducing yourself. I don't even know where to start.
I know. I just, it's the lazy way of me not saying the wrong thing. Do you know what I mean? I just don't want this is what Beth does, and then it's like, well, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we get to talk about the same questions we talked about last time, but it is our listeners' first time hearing it. So that's exciting. So the first question I had was, what changed for you when you began studying QHHT?
So pretty much everything, I would say, because first of all, I don't know if anyone knows any of the books by Dolores Cannon, but her all of her books are basically writings from her sessions. So people would be speaking to her and giving this information, and then she would go to another country, let's say, and that session would then somehow continue on the same information.
Oh, wow.
Which is incredibly strange. So that really fascinated me. And Dolores herself is a skeptic first, which is where I sort of reside. So for me, I'm I want all this to be true, but is it?
Oh, so, same. Yeah.
Right. So of course, my next step would be to then learn it myself because I was curious. And I am very grateful to have had many people that I know give me an entire day of their life to work with. And each one has been incredibly unique and interesting and mind-blowing. I've had two myself that I don't know. I didn't know what to expect. So I was trying to do it in order to feel what maybe they would be feeling. But
Yeah.
I was so aware during my sessions that I never had that feeling of like stepping aside or like witnessing a conversation. And some people have that,
Yeah.
which is really cool. So I've got to facilitate those kinds of sessions,
Yeah.
which is mind blowing. Because I ask everyone, I'm like, what was it like? Because like I want to know what everyone's experience is. And it's usually pretty incredible. They're like, and people will come out sometimes and be like, oh, I don't know, maybe I made it up. I'm like, okay, but why would you make that up? That's pretty weird. And like, especially with past lives, they're generally pretty boring,
Yeah.
right? There's not a lot going on. It's like, why would you make that up? If you're going to make something up, why wouldn't it be cool?
Yeah.
And they're like, very fair. Okay, that makes sense. So, but yeah, it's changed everything really, because I've had, especially sessions with my dad, which he's agreed to allow me to publish.
Mhm.
He's had like stuff that we could Google after and fact check, and then it's like a life from the 1600s that we were able to fact check things on,
Yeah.
which was just mind blowing. And like listening to it, it's just so weird when you know this person and then it sounds like a completely different person.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he goes fully somnambulistic, which means that he becomes the person in that lifetime when we do a past life like aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then when we go to speak with we call it the subconscious. It could be higher self. Some people who don't believe in that, I just say like, sure, let's say it's your subconscious part of your mind,
Yeah.
or even just look at it as your imagination, but it's got all the information that you need because it's all within you. So some people just look at it at that. But when I do this with my dad, it's information that he just couldn't possibly know. I've done surrogate sessions on myself through my dad even,
Wow.
and gotten information about myself that he couldn't know. Like they did a full body scan on me and gave me information. I'm like, yeah, dad wouldn't know that. And it's
Yeah.
just like really, really cool. So yes, everything changed, I think, when I started studying this and actually doing the work.
It's wild too. Like, you know, after my session, I felt like I had to marinate on it for a while.
Mhm.
Like it was one of those things where it didn't immediately hit me as like, whoa, but it was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that was when you said, how was it? I think my response was, that was interesting.
Yep.
In my session, we went through 3 different past lives. And I mean, one of them wasn't entirely even a life. It was weird. It was like an organism or something. But
Mhm.
the other 2 lives were very clear
Mhm.
to me. And one of them actually, I didn't entirely digest it until very recently
Oh.
because I was having I was having these thoughts on it and I kept seeing things that would flash back to me because I have an eidetic memory, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Which is rare. I mean, not super rare. A lot of people have eidetic memories, but what that means is if I see something, experience something, see something written down, I can recall the image almost exactly as I saw it,
Mhm.
right? And so in one of the lives that I experienced, I was a doctor of some kind in an asylum.
Mhm.
And so it was really clear to me that I felt that that life was very, um, I was very grateful for that life. And we followed it right to the end where I died and I was alone, but I was happy.
Mhm.
And I felt like what I had been doing was very fulfilling. And I had been thinking about it a lot, and there were words or moments in the last few months where someone would say something or something would happen, and it would recall a vision of that past life.
Mhm.
And I was like, whoa, obviously way more impactful than I gave it any credit for in the first hour after I left there. I
Yeah.
thought, wow, neat, interesting, cool. But then over the last few months, it's almost like it trickled through into my conscious mind, and I've been reminded of it regularly. And the other life I experienced, now in both lives I was I was a man
Yeah.
in both lives. And the other life I was like a loner drifter guy with a dog.
Yeah. But you didn't really own the dog.
I didn't own the dog.
It was just a visitor.
The dog just followed me
Yeah,
around
just
when
like
I
you.
wandered around,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was interesting too.
Mhm.
So, and I lived in like a rooming house or something with a shared kitchen, and it was set kind of in the 50s or 60s,
Yeah.
something like that. I think it was the 60s, but the rooming house I lived in had been decorated in the 50s. Because that things felt old, like kind of grungy, but like still well kept.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? The style of it felt like the 50s, but outside world felt like the 60s.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting. And all of this just kept feeding back into my life.
Mhm.
And very recently, I had decided to go back to school or apply to school. I don't know if I'm in yet, so we'll see. By the time you all hear this recording, I will know. So either I'll be very sad that I said I applied to school and I didn't get in, or I'll be thrilled because I actually got in. Um, but I've applied to go back for counseling psychology, and in part was influenced by being a doctor in this asylum, because as I was thinking about it, I was thinking how fulfilling that felt
Mhm.
and how the work felt like I was home, which is a really strange feeling.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I thought, I think I've been consciously moving away from that kind of work.
Mhm.
Um, and very recently got a lot more comfortable with the fact that that's probably where I should have been
Yeah.
several years ago.
Maybe, yeah. But I mean,
But it all comes when
yeah,
it's
it
ready
happens when
to,
it's meant to.
yeah. But very interesting
Yeah.
results months later. So
Mhm.
it's almost nice to be re-recording this.
It is actually. That's a really I didn't know that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see this is why I love the idea that part of the actual way of doing this is that we record it and give people the recordings because for several reasons to reflect back on and to see what things have come from that.
Yeah.
But also there are some things that are said that may not click until later, right? And then there are some things, and they may be the smallest detail. I have a great story about that. Um, then the other aspect is you've got your left side of the brain, which is where the logic is, right?
Yeah.
And so listening to the recording over and over again allows that part of the brain to integrate it a lot better because
Right.
you start seeing it may seem magical at first, but like for me anyway, as a skeptical person, I get a lot of doubt. And if I don't keep looking at it and just allowing the observation of it to be what it is instead of constantly trying to make up how this is or what
Yeah.
might be happening other than this, it helps the left brain side actually understand it better. And that's where actual physical healing happens.
Right.
And so many, like what you'd probably call miracles, can happen that way, which
Right.
is just incredible. For the one life my dad had, he was on a ship. And the captain of the ship, he was saying that his jacket smelled like pickled beets and tobacco. And it was just this tiny little sentence in this reading that none of us paid any mind to. So fast forward like 9 months later, and he's decided to do this juicing stuff. So he buys a bunch of beets and went to go grab them. And where he had stored them, I think 4 of them had had a little mold on them. And then so he just asked, I think Alexa or something, and he's just like, or Siri, I think. He's like, what's the best way to store beets? And then the answer he got was like the full history of beets and like when they ended up moving from Egypt, I think it was, and the best way they store and why they use them on ships specifically for scurvy and all this stuff, like stuff he didn't know.
Yeah.
And then he's
So
like,
that's quite a long
it was
answer.
a really long-winded way to say like pickled or fridge, basically, was the best way to keep them. And it made like, it was just like, okay, well, that was long-winded. Why? And so I tried to replicate the search and I could not find that article.
Yeah.
So all this information. So I did another session with him to ask what, like, they said that he was experiencing some fear because he was raised Catholic. And of course, we were told hypnosis is like opening you up to possession or something, right? Stuff that's completely not true and fear-based and all that.
Right.
So they said specifically that they wanted to put that little piece in there so that 9 months later, when he's feeling this, he will have that moment. And they said it's this little tiny moment was more impactful than all the other things for him.
Wow.
Because it was this little reminder. And when I looked at the date, it was 9 months to the day from that first recording to this day that he looked up. It was just like mind blowing constantly, where it seems like the smallest detail. That's why I love the recording so much.
Yeah.
Because going back, you're just like, oh, wow, I forgot that was said.
Yeah.
And it's just, so I ended up re-listening to Dad's recordings again, and even more happened. Oh, it's incredible. It's wow. So eloquent.
No, but I get it. Like, as someone who's also skeptic first, I completely hear you. You approach it initially being like, what's this really gonna be?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you start to see evidence of these moments where you're like, well, wait a minute. That's not super explainable. And then from a scientific point of view, you try and repeat the problem, you try and make it happen again, you try and, and it doesn't. You have these moments where you're like, well, hold up.
Yeah.
What's going on? Sort of like a recording situation.
Yeah.
I tried to repeat that problem
Yeah.
and I couldn't make it repeat.
No.
So I don't understand why that happened. I don't have an explanation. I did experiment several times around with different settings and different positions and different, like, I can't explain it.
And I'm fairly certain we didn't speak like that day.
Yeah, I guarantee you. I guarantee you we weren't muffled, like,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
even,
wow.
so weird, right?
Yeah.
So I hear you. So there's a lot. I mean, I think a lot of people are afraid of what they don't know about.
Yeah.
Right? But also, we're also guarded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I know I'm guarded, and
Yeah, me
like
too.
through life, you create these walls and these obstacles internally, right? Sometimes it comes out as like a fixed mindset
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, I can't do math. And you're like, yeah, that's not accurate. Like, you can teach yourself math. Anyone can teach themselves that. It's literally a matter of practice and focus, but like, it might not come easily to you, but you're not incapable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? And so this is where we start to overcome these obstacles by being like, well, we just have to be a little bit more open-minded or growth mindset around these obstacles or whatever we've created. Some of them, though, like, and I think this is where QHHT can be really effective, are trauma-based, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So they come out of experiencing something and you're thinking, I never want to experience that again. So you put these walls up or these obstacles to not think about those things or not go back to that headspace or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But as a result, we're like locking ourselves off from sometimes our true self.
Yeah, exactly. Or our best versions of us, which are when you're your best version of you, you're the most helpful in the world. Like,
right?
You're the biggest version of yourself.
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I think about, where in life you create hard no's.
That's a good question.
Right?
Yeah.
So, some of it comes out of how you're treated as a child and then how you define yourself as a young person in your formative years.
Yeah.
Right? And you can't see past that definition because it came from the adults in your life or it came from the people who were caring for you or whatever. They defined you.
Yeah. And they generally train you not to question that definition ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what QHHT does is imagine you outside of that.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you can feel the identification of these other lives, if you feel like this is me in this moment, it's it takes you out of the fact that this is the only me.
Yeah.
Right. So the possibilities expand because, like, well, what else have I been and what could I be?
Yeah.
It's a really interesting way to grow,
Yeah.
first of all. And usually what's happening when I do a session, I ask everyone to have a list of questions about their life,
Yeah.
basically, which could be anything. It could be physical, it could be career, it could be finance, it could be anything, relationships, all of it. And then what tends to happen is they have these past lives that from that moment seem very different, and they may only have one, but like some people have several.
Yeah.
And they don't seem at all connected until we get to the subconscious or higher self
Yeah.
part. And you ask, well, why were these the lives you chose to show? And it's like the revelation from that is just like, of course. And it's always, I feel like the universe is very efficient. It always goes for the quickest route
Sure.
that will have the most perfect ripples. Like, it just knows.
Which our type A people will really appreciate.
Yeah, that's nice. And so in these moments, in like one sentence, usually they'll just be like, and by they, I mean the person who's under the hypnosis. I never do the talking. I am only asking the questions. So
Yeah.
they're recording, they're hearing their own voice say these things. So it's pretty cool. But for example, the one session I did, the person had a life where they were completely alone and happy. And they, I think, had a pet dog, like a few animals. And then the next one, they were a wife and their entire thing was to make babies. And like, so they were surrounded by a community, family, had no moments alone. So the contrast of those two lives in that moment, none of us would be like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. They go together.
Yeah.
Well, the point of it was that their higher self was trying to show them balance because they were going to extremes in this life too, and they were being pulled in too many directions, and to find the balance of that. Don't cut yourself off. Don't be alone, but also don't trap yourself in a situation where you're forced to be with people.
Yeah.
Allow grace for yourself in both areas. And in that moment, it made so much sense because these lives didn't look at all alike. And we were just like, okay, why are you doing this? And then it actually answered questions for this person in the most perfect way. And
well, and I think something that our super type A listeners will really relate to is that sometimes it's hard to get out of your own way.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely, yes.
So, part of the preparation of getting ready to do this QHHT practice is to talk out a whole bunch of things and kind of brain dump, and you feel like you're open and ready for anything. And also you're being given permission to put, your boundaries or your conscious self on pause.
Yeah.
Right?
And in those instances, that's my job to build that trust for someone to allow them to let that go.
Yeah.
In order to do this, that's why we say it takes as long as it takes. So the interview portion is what it's called, where the person talks about their life and we go over their questions and all those things. I've had that take as long as 8 hours.
Wow.
In the longest one, because like this is why I dedicate an entire day and I ask people to do the same, not to plan afterwards, because if you're subconsciously watching a clock, you're not going to relax into this and you're not going to get the benefit. So I ask for like, just give me a day and we will go as far as we can, because I also want to give them the most healing possible. And ideally they should only ever need one session. Right. So aside from curiosity, some people like to do more.
Yeah.
But
I can appreciate that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think in those cases, there's a lot of healing even from that time together.
I agree.
Because it's judgment free. There's absolutely no judgment. I'm holding space, and that person can be validated and seen in just like this one day.
And there's something for someone who is super type A to feel that validation, and also recognition, but also throughout the process, like for me, hearing these stories, it allowed me to take things that I had kind of created obstacles in my mind for myself to be like, oh, that's not for you.
Yeah.
And remove those completely
Mhm.
to be like, well, if these other versions of me experienced that and I'm thinking to myself, that's not for you,
Mhm.
how can that be true?
Exactly. Yeah, it's true.
Right?
Mhm.
So it questions these preconceived notions we have
Yeah.
about ourselves
Mhm.
and this life that we're currently living.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? And then for me, also just these reinforcements of values that I continue to hold dear,
Mm.
right? The things that help me guide my life in the direction that I feel the most me,
Mm. Yeah.
right? And you could feel them in these other spaces where
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I'm not so far off the mark here,
Yeah.
right? I've lived these moments in time where in theory,
Yeah.
right? Where these values were also very strong.
Mhm.
And maybe not all of them, but at least the top 2 or 3, right?
Mhm.
Which is for type A person very comforting
Mhm.
to feel like, okay, I'm self-aware enough to know that this is the stuff that's most important to me, and it's so important to me. I've lived several lifetimes where this has been at the top of my values chart,
Mhm. Yeah, definitely.
right?
Yeah, and it was so that one life specifically for you was so fun for me to watch because um like when people are out oftentimes they're still aware. Aware is not awake,
Yeah,
as you know.
I
But
was very aware.
yeah, you were very aware. So you would have these moments where you would say what you were feeling in that lifetime and then how you as the observer was feeling it, and it wouldn't be the same.
No, yeah, very
And it
different.
was so cool to watch that
Yeah.
because it's like you're having this dual experience of this essentially memory of that moment, and it was just the most interesting thing to see because you had both perspectives that you could draw from.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, really interesting. I found it really fascinating. So, kind of along those lines,
Mhm.
how can QHHT bring about more peace? Like, how does more peace come to you through a hypnosis process or experience?
So a bunch of different ways, really. First of all, like I was saying, the interview process alone, just talking your stuff out, sometimes just bouncing it off of another person is what people need. I had one client that felt 10 times lighter just from that part
Yeah,
and was just so relieved to have that part. And I feel like we all carry so much and we just don't ever want to burden people
sure.
with our stuff.
Oh
And
man.
in that
If
space,
that isn't type A, I don't know what is.
right?
Because we carry all the responsibility of the
Exactly.
world on our shoulders, and we
Exactly.
don't want to burden other people with our problems or concerns or whatever that might be. So that's a huge deal.
Yeah, so that aspect of it in itself can bring a lot of peace, just having, like I said, that non-judgmental validation, all of that has helped a lot. And then the actual lifetime that you see or experience, some like it happens in so many different ways, but the lifetimes it's themselves can bring a ton of understanding. Some of this stuff we've carried over,
Yeah,
right? So like some even body ailments you may have carried from another lifetime or experience into this life, and that is once you understand its actual root and you can release that, that's where a lot of this healing can come from.
right.
And then when you talk to the subconscious or the higher self, the understanding you are able to get, like the questions that you bring, we'll develop more questions as we're doing the interview process. Those questions that we can ask of the higher self and the answers you can get. It's amazing. These things that seem so huge and insurmountable, gone. They can
Right.
just go and you can release them and you see them for what they are. I don't know. There's something about being in the theta state that allows you this much more grand perspective of all the things. And you just can reevaluate what's important to such a degree that you can let this stuff go that has been stuck.
It is so interesting you should say that because part of the super type A attempt at being Zen program is to get yourself to a place where you can have clarity on the things that are happening in your life and then reprioritize in a
Yes.
way where it's like, actually, this thing that I hem and haw over and make a big deal about should not occupy my brain space anymore. I'm allowing this to manage my life.
Yeah.
And it's not serving me, right? So in that program, we do a lot of work around that.
That's
How do you
awesome.
release those things? How do you
Mhm.
let them go? How do you notice patterns?
Yeah. Oh, that's hard. How many of us are even taking time to reflect?
Right?
It's like you have to add it on the list as another to do
That's it.
when you're trying to make time for you to even like get to know who you are.
Yeah. So committing that time, like I often say that program, and so it's a 9-week program, right? You have to commit those
Yeah.
9 weeks to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And people get squirrely.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be like, okay, here's the program, here's the pricing, this is what it looks like. And they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. I have the time to dedicate to this. I don't know. There's just so much going on. And the irony of it for me, right? It just, and I'm sure you get this too, a whole day,
100%.
Do you really need a whole day? Can't we do this in a few hours, right?
Oh,
So people will start to negotiate with you
yeah.
on price or timing or whatever it might be, being like, I couldn't possibly dedicate A, that much money, B, that much time to yourself.
Yeah. I
Is
know.
that a real thing you're saying out loud? Yeah.
Mhm.
And here's the funny part of it, folks, is that, you know, you are straight up telling us how badly you need to experience
Exactly.
something like
Yes,
this
exactly.
when you say, I
Yeah.
cannot devote that kind of time or money to myself
Mm-hmm.
because there's all this other business going on in my life that I can barely handle. I guess what I'm saying is that when we devote this time to ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
all that other stuff actually gets parsed into a reprioritized system
Mm-hmm.
where it doesn't feel like all that other stuff
No.
anymore.
You magically gain time.
It's weird.
Yeah.
And, I was saying to Beth when she first got here today, the universe gives you signs. I believe this. It's a little woo-woo, go with it or don't, but I really truly believe that the universe gives you signs. And so oftentimes, like, I'll sit down to work on something, and if it's not going to work out and it's already a total train wreck, and I'm like, why is this so difficult? I will stop and be like, why is this so difficult? I think because this is not what I'm meant to be doing at this moment, and I need to shift my priorities and my focus.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think a lot of us type A people will approach us and say, how do you do so much?
Yeah.
How do you do so many things?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I get this question a lot, as
Mm-hmm.
you can imagine.
Yes.
Right. Because I run a business and I have young children and we just got a puppy.
Yeah.
And I'm going back to school
Yeah.
and I have a podcast and I'm running a retreat this summer and like, and
Yeah.
we're adding to the list and we're adding to the list. But here's the thing. I'm not that stressed out about it.
No.
Not particularly.
Mhm.
And I find myself with big chunks of time for me when I need it.
Yeah.
So how does that happen if I have so many things going on?
Yeah. And anyone would look at that list and be like, oh, that's too much for me. And yet here you are making it happen and feeling good about that.
Because of the time I've already invested in getting to know myself, reprioritizing,
Yep.
understanding what's important, letting go of the things that are using up my brain space or my busy making, just letting them go.
Yeah.
Right. And I think QHHT is a great way to do that, right? Because it brings those priorities to the top of the list. It makes them very obvious. It marries your subconscious to your conscious mind.
Yep. And I mean, even the act of coming up with the questions, which a lot of people even struggle with that. But it gives you that opportunity to look at your life and be like, well, what am I even doing?
Yeah.
And then just like figuring out what you even are curious about
Yeah.
yourself. And it's really interesting how many pieces of the process in QHHT have their own revelations and,
Sure, yeah.
and healings.
Their own value.
Yeah.
Right.
They all, and working in tandem to make whatever these huge things that happen will be. I
Yeah.
can tell you my dad had a hernia for 4 years and he had like a big bump over his belly button. So he had an outie belly button. And during his session, he had a healing and has an innie belly button again. So then later
Like,
I
what?
asked, I know. And later I asked, because this is a visual thing. I mean, he had a lot of stuff internally that they were working on, but I mean, this is something you can tangibly see and witness. And so the next time I had him under, I asked about or like doing a body scan and they were giving me updates on things. And they said they were admiring their handiwork and the patch was holding up. And it was just like one of those things that I'm like, first of all, as a conscious person, if I just think about scanning my body, I don't really know what's going on. But the stuff that came out of him was like medically, it made sense.
Accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, he doesn't know that stuff. So it's really interesting. And then of course, like the patch, okay, sure.
Yeah.
And it's just
Wild.
yeah. And so I mean, like they talk about like different ways, like a drink concoction in the morning that involves like ginger and garlic and turmeric and all these other things that he takes now. And they, oh, it's just incredible. And so his entire existence, he says he feels healthier now when he's going to be 70 this year
Yeah.
than he did in his 40s.
Wow.
And this is all like it kickstarted. He wasn't able to lose weight and he walks every day.
Yeah.
A ton of walking because he has 2 huskies. And he just couldn't drop any weight. He was like eating better and stuff. And then they explained this after his session because the weight just came off after.
Right.
That he was having these energy blocks where the energy he would take in with food would just sort of get bounced off. And so it didn't get processed as energy the same way it should. So it would just get stored in fat. And so what they did is removed the block. And the one recording he has, you can hear this part happening. And he would have like this burning feeling in his stomach. It was very interesting. Anyway, those blocks are gone and now everything goes through perfectly. And he's at the best weight he's been.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. Like,
yeah.
And he did nothing differently.
But it is unbelievable, isn't it? Like you have these moments as a skeptic, you have these moments where you're like, but that no.
Even now I still go through it and I have to re-listen to recordings because I'm like, come on, like what? And then because like my own personal experience, I was so aware during.
Same.
Right?
I was so
it
aware.
was just hard for me. And like with my like the way people experience their higher self or subconscious talking, like my dad, he would go and lay on a hammock or something. That's his experience. And then this other time, right as I'm getting him to go under, and he goes under in like 30 seconds now. It's kind of amazing. He goes, huh, that's different. And then I was like, wait, what? And then greetings. And they were here. And I was like, okay. And then so when he came out and I asked him, he's like, I was on a train this time. And he's like, I was looking for my hammock and I couldn't find my hammock. And then I could hear muffling on the other side. So he could sort of hear the conversation this time. And during this one session, they said, next time he'll be able to hear us. So it's like he was raising, and they explained it, his frequency is raising to the point where he can hear us. So apparently when you're aware, that is because your frequency is like raised enough. So this is actually a sign of our growth and evolution.
Oh, come on.
No kidding. And then
that's wild.
There was some other practitioners that were getting information about DNA and how our DNA is now like completing in a different way. And that's why this is happening. So it's almost like the veil is thinning and all this stuff. And so it's really interesting to hear it on that level and then see it in my own sessions. And yet I'm still like, but is it real?
Like, I know. Well, and it takes you to this place like, you know, okay, so my husband is a skeptic, but he's also like a huge nerd, right? Yeah. And he is obsessed with the whole concept of aliens right now because they've released all this information and it's real information, right? It's not like that's the part that's messed up. Yeah. It's you go, yeah. And they're like, no, this is nonfiction. Like it's actual real life information about alien crafts or interactions with foreign objects or videos of foreign objects that cannot be explained or whatever. There's all of this stuff, right? So he's obsessed. And every time they release something new, he'll be like, look at this video or read this article or check this out. And still in my mind, I'm like, yeah, no, I mean, there's going to be a logical explanation for this.
Yeah.
But also my logical mind says, are you so ignorant and so arrogant
Yeah, that's the word I
to
was thinking.
think that the human race is the only living
Yeah.
being in the universe? Like, no, absolutely. So do I believe that aliens exist? Guys, you gonna get me on audio here saying this out loud?
Hopefully.
Yes, of course they do.
Yeah.
How could they not?
Yeah.
How
It
could
makes no
sentient
sense.
beings outside of this planet not exist? That would be so arrogant to believe that.
Yeah.
But then when I hear stuff like this from you too, I'm like, okay, are they already here? And they're like having these conversations that we can't hear yet, but maybe we could, like,
Right.
and I start to go down the rabbit hole of here's a huge block of stuff that I question
Mhm.
as far as like, can I believe this? Do I believe this? This is too out there for me.
Yeah.
But also, is it related? Like, I have these moments where I
Yeah.
wonder how much of this stuff that we don't believe or that we say is fiction
Mhm.
is actually true, and how much of that stuff is related. Not to say like QHHT lets you talk to aliens, but maybe it does. What do I know? I don't know.
There are a lot of cases of people having different, like, more than just higher self conversations. There's like the council, one woman that had a QHHT session then became a channel for the council. And it's like all these different galactic beings that come through. Again, my skeptic is just like, but really, but really. But at the same time, it's just like, I don't know, maybe.
But like, from purely scientific point of view, okay,
Yeah.
let's posit that aliens are real.
Okay. Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're assholes.
Yeah, I think so.
Right?
We're not the center of the
We're
universe.
not the center of the universe. There's no way. There's just no way. Okay.
Right.
So let's posit. Okay. Aliens are real.
Mhm.
Right. And then let's posit that during this hypnosis thing, you are way more aware of your subconscious.
Mhm.
Right. And then let's also say that not all beings are going to communicate in the same way.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
And there's been like decades and decades of documentation around, psychic connections, or
Yeah.
what they call the higher intelligence, where somebody comes up with an idea and literally like 3 days later in the middle of nowhere in a different country on the other side of the planet, they come up with the same thing. So, once something's been invented,
Yeah.
it
Collective
opens the
consciousness.
floodgates of
Yeah.
what can be done.
Mhm.
Once somebody's beat a record, it opens the floodgates of other people beating that record. Like,
Yep.
there's just this weird collective consciousness that we
Mhm.
all share. You can believe that or you cannot believe it. I mean, I choose to believe it because I feel that it allows us all to go further faster.
Yeah.
And as a super type A person, that's very attractive to me.
Yes.
Wow, what a fascinating conversation with Beth Grixti. Please do join us for part 2. You do not want to miss out. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Visit www.yorkmotivational.com for more information on my Super Type A attempt at being Zen, the coaching program, Lead Without Permission, or visit our contact page to reach out to Risha. Wishing you all continued balance and fulfillment on your road to Zen.